Welcome to the Infinite Life with Katische Haberfield. I'd like to take you on a transformative journey, exploring the mysteries of the soul. I hope you enjoy the regression case studies, mediumship interviews, and fascinating discussions that I've had with guests on the podcast. I hope that these answer some of the questions that you might have about life on this planet, on others, and in other dimensions. Thank you for joining me, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. And, most importantly, share with your friends. Namaste. Welcome back to the Infinite Life with Katische Haberfield podcast. I'm your host, Katische Haberfield, and we are in season 13 of the podcast. And this week we have another Aussie, which is a real blessing for me because I usually talk to people from all around the world. I don't get very many Aussies. So welcome to the show, Catherine Crestani.
Thank you so much for having me, Katische.
You're welcome. Now I'll just read your profile so that people can understand a little bit about you before we get into our discussion, which is going to be about the magic of trees. Catherine has worked in allied health before transitioning into a career as an intuitive healer and spiritual coach. She has run and sold successful companies, mentored students and others in her profession, as well as guided and healed many souls globally. Catherine hosts a podcast called Willow Healing Matters and interviews guests from around the world about their healing journeys. This title is also shared for her Substack, where articles are shared each week to inspire others and empower them on their journey. Catherine's interest in writing resurfaced as a way to share information she's collected and reflects on the intricacies that make life extraordinary. The idea for Catherine's novels and books come through to her through her intuition. Catherine is unaware on what will come until the book is being written and the manuscript unfolds. This has led her to writing from a unique perspective that is beyond her imagination and keeps her guessing as much as those she's writing for. With unique storylines and spiritual topics that will capture an audience, Catherine is excited to share her spirit writer with the world. Well, there we go. So that's great. So, trees in the background for a start.
Yes.
Let me in on your journey. Firstly, in terms of how did you first discover this connection to trees, or how did that come about? What was the process like for you?
Oh, it was, so as part of my spiritual awakening journey, I've always felt very connected to land. I remember when I was younger and I'd watched Pocahontas for the first time and I thought, oh, I want to be Pocahontas. I want to run with the wind and have a mother willow tree and all these amazing things. And that's not where willow came from, but it's funny, I have willow in my title. And just evolving with that but then it kind of got squished, as life happens and all your friends and your influences, and to the point where I was like, I think when I was getting near the end of high school, I want to live in an apartment in the city. And now I couldn't want further from that. I want to be surrounded by trees and have ocean in front of me and really have that land and that space to be with that. So as I was going through my spiritual journey and unpacking things, I started to connect more with guides and with different intuitive people, and I kept getting this thing with trees coming up, and my spiritual mentor came down to the property where I live at the moment, and we went out into the land, and I felt very connected from there from a very early point moving down here. So the connection originally started when it was actually my birthday, and we'd been living here for 2 or 3 months. And my husband said, I'll take our son out, and your gift is you can go meditate in the bush. Thank you. So I went out there and this beautiful spirit of the land came forward and just beckoned me to follow and took me through this crazy track through like the bush and everything. And I just trusted it and kept following. And there was this big, beautiful tree, and I call it the heart tree. And I sat down and I just felt myself in this circle and enamored with this circle and around. And they said to put my hands on the tree. And I just had this beautiful feeling of love, but also being shown the shadows that I needed to work through and the darkness as well, because it's when we truly embrace that side of ourselves that we can love ourselves completely and wholly. And so then I started to get these messages through trees, and I felt pulled to start running nature camps with kids as well. So I would take kids out into the bush and actually teaching them you need to ask permission first before you just take something from something. And kids are so easy to work with. They didn't question it. They would just go, "Oh, can we pick this flower?" I said, "I don't know. Did you ask?" And they're like, "Hang on. Oh no, it said no." And then we'd have this discussion about possibly why it said no. Maybe it needed it to pollinate, or maybe it needed it to share its seed, or whatever it might be. Or maybe the animals needed it to eat. But they were just so open to it. Whereas if I'd have that conversation with an adult, they'd be like, "Why do we need to ask? I can't hear anything," just really, really doubting. And then my spiritual mentor was out with me, and we were walking, like connecting in with the heart tree and then connecting with other aspects of the land. And we were both pulled to this tree, and it's like a child tree. And it had this really childlike energy, and it was so cheeky because you'd see it and then you'd almost walk past it the next time. It was almost like playing hide and seek with you, like pulling its energy in and pushing its energy out. And then we were both there standing at it going, "I wonder what its name is," because trees can often have names, and if you start looking too, they have faces. It's really cool if you start to look for the faces. And at the same time, I said, "Immy something," and she said, "Timmy." And at that moment, we're like, okay, we're both not crazy. We're both getting the same intuitive moment. And it was really gelling for us. And from there, this information just started to come through on how to connect with trees and actually how to use them to heal your own energy, but also how to share that with others too.
Mm-hmm. And, well, two questions. The first question is, when you said you followed the spirit through, would you call that a nature spirit, or would you call that, was it like a First Nations Aboriginal kind of a spirit?
Yeah,
I
it
know
was
they're one and
more.
the same in a way because,
Yeah. I feel it was more a First Nation spirit, but even
yeah.
older than that. It felt even more like older than that, like almost like the original guardians of the land, if I put it back even before that. So it had that First Nations feeling, but then also had that very primal, we were here first.
Okay,
We
okay.
and it's very different because when I connect in with the elemental energy, it has a more, it's not as heavy for a lack of better word. Like it's not as here's your responsibility. It's like, hey, like if you connect with the energy of the wind and the elements, they're very flighty for lack of a better word. They're very energetic and playful, and they just want to engage with you. Even water can be like that, and fire salamander. It's very, very playful. And the gnomes are very cheeky, and fairies, if anyone's played with fairies, it's just like they're just cheeky, and if you don't keep honoring them, if you started honoring them, they will make sure that things go missing. So,
Right, okay, yep.
yeah. So it had that deeper kind of energy because I have worked with some clients where they've had First Nations people come up because of where their land is and things like
Yes.
that. And
Mm-hmm.
it almost feels older than that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, interesting. And the spiritual mentor that you have that came with you, is that a First Nations person or no?
No, and we just both have this very deep connection with the land. And I feel it's almost our souls have been shamans and worked with the land before. Like we just feel very pulled to it. And it's funny because I went on a medicine walk with a First Nations person, and people kept asking me if I was First Nations. And I said, no, I just have this deep connection with the land, and I get what they're preserving, and I get the energy that comes through because once you connect in, you realize we're all part of nature and we're all connected to nature. And it's really, there's no difference of what your background is. If you have that connection, you're almost indoctrinated into the energy of it.
Interesting. The only reason that I was asking these questions is because obviously we're in Australia, so somebody from overseas is going to say, well, oh, I had a comment the other day, oh, Australians are very spiritual people, and that was a podcaster's experience. And so I was like, so for somebody who's majority of people listening to this podcast are Americans, so they were probably wanting to know and understand spirituality in Australia, what does it mean, and is there these delineations and pockets that belong to the energy of the land. And what you've said is no, I don't identify it as any one particular thing or any one past life. It just seems to be part of what my soul is interested in. Would that be a good description?
Yeah, exactly. And it's how we choose to connect. And I feel a lot of us, when you were saying like Australians tend to have a spirituality thing, I think it depends where you go, right? And
Mm,
it's funny because we often get pulled to other people who are like us, and then we end
mm.
up in those communities. But then at the same time, you get both sides because you need the balance. But there's so much science evidence now coming out to back up all this connection with nature. In the Japanese, they've got the Japanese culture, they actually have a practice where the doctors prescribe forest bathing, where you go
Mm.
out into the forest and you let nature heal you. The evidence from science is starting to catch up with that. And even grounding, finally, people are like, oh, it actually does all this great stuff for your body. I'm like, yeah, it does. That just comes from us having that intuition and that inner wisdom too, of feeling like, hey, we need to connect with nature for some reason and not even knowing why. And it's very rare you'll meet somebody that will see a big, magnificent tree and not be in awe of it, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Interesting you point about grounding because I do think Aussies wear shoes less than other people in the world.
Yeah, we do.
And I think lockdown and COVID, for example, was a really great example of when, so I live in a townhouse and I had just purchased it before lockdown and there's no grass. It's a paved courtyard and I was like having to go outside of my fence and stand on the grass on the nature strip to ground because I was like, I need some grass under my feet to let go of some of this energy. I'm not sure. I've had clients and they're like, no, I wear shoes all day, every day. And I'm like, get your shoes off. Get your shoes off.
Agreed. And especially for children, it's so important. Like, we don't realize how much all the energy that we're exposed to all the time actually impacts children. And one of the first things, even when I was working in my allied health role, is that I would say to parents, actually, let them take their shoes off and go run on the backyard barefoot. And they're like, oh, but the grass is wet. I'm like, that's even better. It's even bigger conduit. I said, just have a towel ready for when they come back in. Like, they need to go barefoot. And there's been so much thing coming out too, showing that shoes actually change the structure of our feet and aren't actually good for us. Like, there's so much coming out now. And that's why people are heading back to those barefoot shoes and all those new things coming out. But it's that connection that, especially for children, not just us, but for children, that pulls them back into their body and stops all the interference from TV, from Wi-Fi, from computers, from phones, from everything else that's happening around us, and even the energy that's emitted off other people. So by grounding, you're actually just saying to the earth, all right, I've got this. So even if you imagine your head's magnetic north and your feet are magnetic south, and then the earth is magnetic north. So when you sit on that, you're automatically creating a new circuit and you're clearing everything in your field, which is so important.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I just have flashbacks when you were talking about being a kid, and we used to live in this house on the top of a hill. And my mother must have gone insane with all the grass stains from us rolling down the hill for fun, which you just don't see kids rolling down the grass anymore because they've got to stay clean and they've got labeled this and that. And it's like, no, they need to get filthy dirty. They need to have mud up their nostrils and grass in their ears and be itchy as heck.
And all the bindies stuck in their foot. Yeah.
Yeah, and which brings us to trees because growing up in the 70s and 80s, my dream, which didn't come true, but my next door neighbors had one, was to have a tree house. Kids used to climb trees a lot more and break a lot more arms and do ridiculous things trying to get into a tree. So if you can break it down however you'd like this discussion to go, where do we start with understanding trees, the wisdom that's contained within and the knowledge that they can give us so that we can basically interact with the magic of trees? How do you even start on that topic?
It's actually easier than you think. So the biggest thing is to be like quite open and vulnerable and actually ask for permission. And you will feel it. I know it sounds really weird, but you'll just feel like a no or a yes, even if you can't hear it, you can't see it. You'll just kind of feel, it's like when you go into a room and you feel welcomed or you don't feel welcomed. It's that sort of energy. So when you're approaching a tree or feel pulled to a tree, it's like, can I have permission to connect with you? And that opens up a level of respect on both sides. Also, you're asking permission to be in their field and they're accepting you or not into theirs. So it's like that, being really open with that. And then there's two ways you can connect. So if you want to do a really simple way is you can just sit and lean with your back against the trunk of the tree And what that does is the energy from the tree will actually clear your chakras. So it'll actually clear the energy field and rebalance you really quickly. And there's nothing that you really need to do other than that. The
Ah,
other
okay.
way, yeah. And it's funny because I was talking to someone about this topic and she said that she just found this tree. I don't know, she was overseas somewhere and she leant back against this tree and she could feel the energy running up and down her spine. But then the tree actually, she almost heard it say, I'm going to give you a healing. And she actually fell asleep. And when she woke up, her body stopped hurting. So this beautiful tree shared that energy with her. And all she went in was like, I just want to connect with you, and just went in with that intention. So that's one way that you can connect. The other way is through the roots. So we often think that the trunk holds all the energy of the tree, but it's not. All the wisdom and the energy actually comes from the roots of the tree, because that where is where it sinks down into earth and can connect to Mother Earth. So for those of you who don't know, there's many energy grids running through the world and through under this planet, and they're called ley lines or song lines or energy lines or whatever term kind of resonates with you with that. And these trees are all connected into that network, so they can all share wisdom with each other. But what I've found through collecting people's tree stories and things like that is whatever wisdom and healing shared is unique for you. So I could connect with the tree, and then my mentor could connect with the tree, and I could feel it more in my third eye or my crown, and she felt it more in her heart because that's where she needed at the time. So it really reflects on what you need. And the wisdom that comes through is often, it might just be a word, it might be guidance, you might be shown or feel something. Like I was saying, when I connected with the heart tree, it showed me the shadows that I needed to work through. And it depends how you face that too, right? So some people will be like, oh, I'm not going there, I'm not touching that again. Whereas I'm like, oh no, thank you, I needed to work on that, appreciate that. So it depends what intention you go in with. And once you're connected in with the roots, for me, when I connect, I kind of get shown the life of the tree. So it's almost like those nature documentaries, where it's on fast forward. So I get that. And sometimes it can be really crazy, especially where I live. There's been lots of fires. So the fires get played through and then you can see how they survive. And then when you get through that, to understand where the trees come from, then you get the wisdom come through, or then you get the energy come through, or then you get the healing come through. And it really depends what you need and what the tree feels that you need as well, because it is a relationship. And then all of a sudden, you'll just start to hear or feel pulled to trees or plants or that sort of thing. Because once you open yourself up to that connection and into that network, it's just like you're saying, okay, I'm ready to listen to nature again and ready to reestablish that I am from here and I am part of it. It's really important moving forward with that regard.
Interesting. And just to come back to your comment about the trees clearing the chakras, that makes sense to me because I've always loved looking at pictures and posts of people hugging trees, but I've never felt compelled to do more than put a hand on a tree and then go, yeah, no, nothing. But about a month ago, or maybe 2 months ago now, I was on my walk and there are some really beautiful trees on my walk. It's down through, it's now a forced waterway, but it was originally an Aboriginal First Nations corroboree site, and so it was a waterway with special significance for them. And anyway, there's this one tree, and I thought I'd been for a big walk, and I was feeling a bit exhausted, but it was sort of on a bit of a hill, and I was like, okay, I hope nobody's looking, but I'm just going to give this tree a really big hug, and I did, and I just went, whoo. Like I almost cried because it was like this massive relief as all of this energy just came out of me. And I was like, wow, okay, so that works. That was very cool. Thank you. But I was like, yeah, that was like my first belief in the fact that I knew at a conceptual level that there was benefits and that people do hug trees, but I'd never been called to it. But this particular one tree, it was just like, wow, that was great. I feel so much better now.
Yeah.
So yeah. I didn't think of it as chakra clearing at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I think it's pulling yourself to, like you said, Katish, out of your head. So you stop trying to put a logical point of view to it and rather just feel it, because it's when we're in that feeling that we can truly feel nature and be in touch with nature, that we are more open to what comes through rather than trying to explain it away with logic or think, oh, they're a crazy tree hugger or whatever it might be, right? Instead, it's like, yeah, okay. And then I read this story the other week, and this person was, did I read it or someone? I don't know if I read it or someone told me. I don't know. It could be either way. Anyway, and this person was walking along and they were going for a bushwalk and they saw someone hugging a tree, and they actually stopped and went, no, I'm going to hug a tree too. So then they started hugging a tree, and apparently it created this chain reaction and everyone was coming and hugging these trees. I was like, how beautiful to see that. And they were all just like, oh, these beautiful trees. And if anyone's been to Yosemite and those big, massive trees there, or been to the redwood forest, the energy is so different. Like you just feel, wow, like these trees have so much wisdom to share, and especially the older the tree, the more that they have seen and the more they have to share with the world.
My favorite essential oils have always been like cedarwood, frankincense, all the woods.
Black fir.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Sorry, I've just got really, really hot, which usually for me means that there's some present life wisdom that's coming through. It's just start dripping. And also one of the other questions I wanted to ask you about, because you said, and we'll get onto this further in the moment, you said you were writing a book about trees and people were sending you in stories of trees. Have you heard? You're either going to have heard of this a lot or maybe not so much. So one of the things that I do is I'm a ghost rescue medium, which is part of the important work that I had to do to heal karma for my own soul from incarnations in the military and things like that. And so my last few years have been incredibly intense with bringing through ghosts from all lifetimes, like going as far back as you can imagine.
Multi-generational, yeah.
No, like I'm talking thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands a year. So anyway, one of the funny situations I had when I was learning to do it, like originally some of the tools, the various boxes and apps and things to get my confidence before I had my mediumship skills fully sorted. And I remember being in a cemetery. And
always fun.
A lot of cemetery work. And I was talking to a whole bunch of ghosts actually, and they mentioned that the tree at the front of my house was a portal that was involved in connecting me directly with bringing through the ghost. So ghosts can come through your Akka cord, but it was interesting because I always knew, because my cat can see ghosts. And so when I was going through this huge initiation, he would at dawn and sunset just sit at the front of our gate, because we live opposite a hospital as well, meowing nonstop.
You were just setting you up for I'm open all the time, right?
Yeah. It was an initiation by fire, I tell you. Because I couldn't ghost over before I moved and bought a house in front of a townhouse. I'd never even thought about it. And so suddenly he would sit there meowing and meowing and meowing. And so initially I was like, well, they're coming from the hospital. And then I was like, oh no, some of them are coming from my clients because of past life regression. And some of them are due to me. And then I was like, I have this theory that this tree, which is beautiful in front of my house, is also part of it, because I just had this feeling. And then when I had this confirmation via this actual app where the ghost says, your tree at the front of your house is a portal, I was like, well,
thank you. Yeah, well, I guess that's the whole thing with trees, right? So, First Nations people and a lot of shamans, they'll say that there's the grandfather and the grandmother of the tree and that sort of thing. So we actually had, I was like, do I share this story? I said, yes. Okay, so we had this break and lay line on our property, and that was part of why we got pulled here in the first place, because we were sent to repair this ley line. And this big, beautiful grandfather tree, like a big eucalypt, it was clearly dormant. I wouldn't say dead, because there was still energy in there, but it was almost like the soul was trapped in the tree because of how sudden it ended. But what I've learned doing this work is that a grandfather tree cannot leave the land or a grandmother tree cannot leave the land without passing its crown on because it needs someone else to take on the responsibility of looking after the energy. So that's why this energy was still trapped in this tree. And then the ley line itself was broken and disrupted because of this energy that had been stuck. And all the trees started to, they twist normally when they're on a ley line, but they were also all dead. It was so interesting to see when I could see the line. It was just like this line as far as you could see of twisted trees, all dead in a row. And so when we had to release that soul, I actually opened up a portal to help the soul of the tree go on. But we also at the same time, when I say we, my husband was doing Reiki on the tree to help give it that boost of energy to let the soul leave. And we had to move the crown at the same time to the heart tree, the one I was talking about earlier, because that was the one that was planned to take it over. So in that respect, all trees have these souls. So why not could that, if there's a mass, I almost can see if there's not a mass exodus of trees or even like a ton of trees taken quickly or really quick, why could a portal not open there? The same as if there's that disruption of energy, that tends to be where the portals tend to open. So definitely the tree could act as a gateway. And then if you take it further into that shamanism, the tree of life is a portal in itself, right? So you've got the tree of life and you can enter it and then be portaled forward into your future or portaled forward backwards into your past or taken wherever you need to go to the underworld where you can connect more with animals or whatever it might be. So that to me just makes sense why that would be, and probably why you bought the house where you bought it, because that, yeah, it was aligning for you to step into your path.
Yeah. And that is very interesting because so I bought a townhouse. There was just 5 when I bought it here. And it was on a block, which I knew at the time that I purchased was going to be developed as part of the greater development. So there's another 26 behind us now. And it took me quite a few years to realize that there was a First Nations man stuck here. And so I helped him, and he's become a guide of mine to understand nature. But my question was, when you're talking about these trees needing to move on and pass the crown, so, and this must be for anybody with that are clearing a block. If you live on a block, right, which has had a substantial amount of trees cleared before you purchased your house or townhouse or unit or whatever it is, what would an aware person do to make sure that the energy of those trees has moved on so there's not, issues with that stuck energy? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because it's like a graveyard, essentially. It is the
okay.
same energy as a graveyard, especially
Okay.
if they're taken really quickly and really. This actually happened down at Carrington Falls, which is a place down south, and it's a very sacred area to the First Nations people. And we were doing this medicine walk, and all these trees had just been taken. And I just started crying. And I said, "Can I have permission?" Because it wasn't my land. "Can I have permission to clear them?" And they're like, "Go for it." Because it was just all these like souls stuck. It's like if an animal passes or even a person passes, it was all just stuck there. So if you were going onto a block and you feel there's been a lot of trees cleared, whether you can see it visibly or you just feel like something's in balance here, I guess you would just, the image I'm getting is you would just sit in the middle of the land and close your eyes and put your hands on the earth and just let to see what happens. And if you feel to, you can always open up a portal. And the intention behind opening a portal, because opening portals can always be a bit precarious. Yeah. But the intention is you're opening a portal to God. You're opening a portal. So it's like a white light portal, and then you send those souls back and you just leave it open and they'll just happily go. They're really easy to move on unless they're angry. It's exactly the same as working with spirits, unless they're angry and they have a message that they want to get through. But then also you can make a deal with the land, because often if you don't, there'll be a disharmony. And it's funny because the first house I built, I always used to joke and say it was cursed and there was bad luck. And I wasn't very spiritual at that point. I was very intuitive, but and would follow my gut instincts, but I didn't have that spiritual awareness. And to the point that when I was building, like all these things happened to delay it, or weird things would happen. And even we were putting in a pool. So you can imagine we're digging in down layers by that point. And the guy knocked over, open a drain, the backyard flooded, like we didn't get the deck finished when we were meant to. Like all these things just kept happening. And the guy actually said to me, "No, I actually think your house is cursed." And then we couldn't sell the place because the land wouldn't let go of us. And it was only when I sat with the land and could see that there was actually an angry elder, because I was like, I just honored it. And I just felt to honor the land. So this is what people can do. They can honor the land in some way. So it might be you leave an offering of rocks, or you leave an offering of a plant, or sometimes you might feel to bake cookies or whatever. Just trust what
Yeah.
comes through, and you honor the land, and that will help you to release that energy that's holding it there, but also develop that respect, saying, "I know this happened to you. I'm sorry this happened to you. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't me, but I would like to build a place here, and I want to replace some of the nature. If you can replace it with plants or trees, or whatever capacity you can do that, and really have that agreement with nature. And then often it will reciprocate that with you too."
Okay, so it's quite like very similar to working with a house spirit, for example.
100%. It is. It's almost exactly the same, because I sometimes have spirits show up too, and I'm like, "Oh, hello. Why are you here?"
Yeah. Yeah. Okay,
Exactly.
that's cool. Yeah, because I do clearings for houses, and I did clear this whole property before everybody moved in, because I was like, I've got a responsibility. I found a lot of stuff here, and the Aboriginal man, First Nations man, his life was sacrificed here as part of a tribal system, and as he says to me, "I know I deserved what I got, but I lost my life for it." But as you know, that and it leaks the energy of blood and stuff into the land and trauma, and you get all the negative entities and everything. But I didn't, all the different things that I was doing, I didn't do trees as part of it. I didn't consider them as a soul. So that's a really interesting insight for me. And
Yeah.
that would
It,
probably link to our plumbing problems that the whole block has.
yeah. And that was a big thing. Um, oh wow. Even they don't want me to say that. Oh, sorry. Um, Even the roots underneath, because the energy of that would still be there. Oh wow. Oh,
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a pretty strong.
whatever's running through your plumbing. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it's an old it's like
Oh,
we sit on top of quartz,
mm, mm.
and then so there was
Well, that would
trees.
be holding the energy 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, trees and then quartz, because around the corner is an old quarry. So
Yeah.
you can see the image. And so yes, it's not substantial. The laundry overflows, and then when we were away, thankfully, so I knew it had nothing to do with me. When we were away, they had major sewage issues because one of the new house owners flushed nappies down the toilet. Hello. But I was like, I'm one of the first people on this land. So if I can work with the trees, and you felt it. What about, okay, so sorry, I know this is like a troubleshooting session here, but I think people can learn from this. So the quartz, the rock, right?
Mm,
You got very strongly there that it's holding stuff as well. Can you tell me how that works with rocks? And the rocks I mean, how did
yeah.
that
That
work with the,
rocks have an energy and a soul to them too. So we have a rock out the front of our house called Harvey. His name's Harvey.
okay.
And he looks like he has three snake heads, which I found really interesting in itself, but it's very protective energy. But you can actually do the same thing and tune into the energy of the rocks. And depending on the trauma that it's gone through too, it will share different insights as you as well. So it still has an energy too. So our neighbor around the corner, he actually dug into the rock to build his house, because it was like right on the top of a sandstone plateau. And he was digging into it really far. And I went for a bushwalk and I looked up, and then I just heard, he has to honor us. He's taking the rocks away, but he's not honoring it. And I had to go over there, and I barely know this man. And I said, "Hey, I kind of do this stuff with nature, and I'm just getting that you really need to honor the rocks." Because no, I'm open to that. What do I need to do? And I was like, all right, we'll just get some of the rocks that you cut up and actually make a really nice tribute. And then that's honoring the rocks of the land and really being honoring to that energy that you've disrupted. Because rocks, because they're so connected, especially if they're like under the ground and things like that, you never fully take away the whole energy, but you're still taking away parts of it. It's like you're cutting off an arm kind of thing. So if you're honoring that and really being, again, talking to the land and being gentle with it, then it's more accepting of it and you're not going to have many problems, because that's what I got told. It's like, if he doesn't honor us, we'll make his life really difficult. And rocks are very hard energy. So if you're disrupting rock energy, it's going to push back in catastrophic ways normally, because it is so big. And so that's why you get rock slides when the land's been disrupted so much. And that's why you get the rocks falling in random places. So it's really about, again, tapping into that energy and being aware of that. And then rocks itself, they can be so grounding and just so, I often just sit on a rock to meditate and things like that, because it just seems to anchor you when you're going up into the ether, and you want to,
yeah. And there's no signs of rocks here anywhere because everything's been concreted over. But yeah, that's really interesting, because one of the things last year I went through this process where all of my third eye just blew open and I could see multiple timelines at once, and it was just, oh my God, it was
it's always fun when that happens. It's like, oh, the quantum realm.
But I had this reoccurring sensation that we could blow on this site, like literally like the quartz igniting and just going so that's interesting. So because what I feel from that reaction that you had was like the rocks are angry.
Yeah, and especially quartz and any crystal. Well, any rock is a form of a crystal. Even sandstone's a type of a crystal, right? Because of how they're created and have that pressure and that sort of thing, especially quartz. Quartz takes on everything, like it absorbs the energy so much, and it has that, I can't think of the word, but where it actually can create electricity. So your insight into there's a possible timeline where we blow up. Well, yeah, if there's enough stress and charge going through that quartz, it is going to cause a reaction, which can cause an electric spark, and then, especially if you've got gas around and things, it's just going to go boom, 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 boom,
That's
so
a gas pipeline.
Yeah. So
that's interesting. Yeah, because we're the hospital that was built across the road from us. And so the only reason that I'm talking about all this sort of stuff as well is people are quite aware of my own journey through the podcast. And so the hospital across the road for us was built in World War One, right? And was and World War Two. It's a military hospital. And so from what I can see from the pictures, because I've crossed a lot of ghosts over from the hospital, but what I can see where my house would be was originally an original house, but before that would have been all the makeshift camps.
I just heard infirmary.
Infirmary, all the military prison of wars. And I've always felt like maybe the bodies were disposed down in the stream for the prisoner of war, because I've always felt like this dirty energy in the creek down below. And I was like, it's not enough. You don't go down there. Like there's a big fence and everything. But I was like, I bet you one day there's a bone will float up from a Japanese prisoner of war or something. And I was just like, when you said the rock holds the anger, then I was like, well, then, the soldiers were angry when they came back from war. And so they were being either, healed, tortured, mended, tortured, whatever you want to say. And I've always felt tortured. But, that's not in the government's official history.
No, but we don't talk about that.
But I've always had this thing of, I'm sure there were prisoners of war right in this site. And, but I've never tapped in or found the energy of a Japanese POW, but it makes sense that it could be in the rocks. So that's really insightful. We've got from trees to rocks to prisoner of wars to torture. And I'm like, I knew this, but I needed somebody else with more skills to confirm that, because clearly I've also felt like I was a little bit trapped in this house, meaning that my future wouldn't open up, because I want to have a house with grass and trees and land, that my future income stream wouldn't open up until I had done some kind of responsibility towards healing this land. And so you've given me some interesting food for thought there, because that they would be like, you have to heal it. You're the only one on the block that can heal it, and you've got to some kind of responsibility there. So that's,
So I had two things come up there, and it said the first thing was don't think that the prisoners that were torturing were always from overseas, because this actually happened in my family where my grandfather was dobbed in for being an alien, from Italy, because the neighbor was jealous that he was had better tomatoes than him, right? And he got shipped off to an internment camp in South Australia. No one knows really what happened there, but I think my mum said she's going to turn it into a book. But he actually, at the end of the war, he had to walk back home to Broken Hill. So if anyone's listening to this, this is like, I don't even know how many thousands of kilometers, but he had to hitchhike. And at the meantime, my grandmother and her young son at that point were left running the farm all to themselves, not knowing what happened, couldn't get in contact, blah, blah, blah. So there was all this kind of other things happening underneath. So even go deeper into what, there's almost an injustice energy there that I'm hearing.
yeah, yeah.
And then the other part is that with your vision of what you want, you need to ask your current vision, what do you need to do to let go?
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Because it's only then that you can see the contracts that are tying you to the land now and how they can be ended or severed, if that's so your path moving forward, that then you can move to that next step. So it was for me, it was once we healed that ley line and the broken ley line, it was like I had no, because my vision expanded. So I went from doing something small to something quite on a global scale. And once I tapped into that, then I had this big pull to go heal the ley line. And my husband was ready at that point too, like with his energy work. And then we went over there, and once we released that, I was like, I'm not meant to be here anymore. So then we're following this pull to sell our house now and move somewhere else. And even I went for a walk the other day, and because I was taking a photo of a couple of the trees that have been really significant for my tree book, and the land just kept saying, "You're not welcome here anymore. You need to go. You actually need to go. We're pushing you out. You need to go." Like, it's such a big pull. And, we've been talking about it and how quickly this house was. I said, energetically, we are getting pushed out. I said, we need to go somewhere else and do healing somewhere else. So a bit like how you got pulled to buy that townhouse that you're on. And then it opened up a whole can of worms, and which is great because you had to go through that so your soul could expand. But at the same time, you just look back and go, whoa.
Oh, yeah. What was I thinking? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
But yeah, I had to. But yeah, interesting, very interesting. And yeah, I didn't realize that they would torture our own.
There's
Wow.
there's there's so much in history that, because history is always written from the victor perspective, right? So we often miss both sides of what really happened. And I find a lot when you're intuitive or you work a lot as a medium or things like that, the truth comes out and it's almost like you can't even talk about it because no one's going to believe you because
Mm.
the history's been so changed and tainted. Whereas when you talk to other people who have been through, connected with the same energy, and we all have the same story, well, then it's like, oh, okay, great. I'm not exactly crazy, but again, you just don't talk about it. Like, it's just this kind of like, yeah, it happened. But at some point, I feel the truth will just bubble out because that's what happened. Like you said, a bone might pop out of the river. So, yeah. And
I
that's,
always had that kind of a feeling. I don't know why, but it was just like, yeah.
yeah, and even as the energy of Mother Earth and the Earth is increasing as it shakes more out, I don't know if you found, but more and more spirits are being shaken out too, because they're not meant to be here anymore and they need to be cleared. And it's almost like, as mediums or spirit workers or however you want to identify yourself, it's actually our obligation to help them move on as quick as they can.
Oh, yeah.
And that biggest thing comes from animals and trees as well, because their spirits can still be trapped as well, depending on how they were taken. So even though we're doing this big back burning down near where I live, and I was driving home and I saw the back burning and I'm like, oh, and I just opened this big portal for all the trees to move through, and not to mention the insects and the ants and all the bugs that get discounted and
Yeah.
everything else, because it's when that energy stays trapped that the frequency starts to drop again. So it's like this big deal. It's this big deal, but it's this big obligation that we have to help these spirits move on in whatever capacity, whether it's nature, whether it's animals, whether it's humans, however that comes through.
Mm. Fascinating. Very interesting. Thank you. Right.
No pressure.
No, it's good because it's just a confirmation of a lot of, because I have a traditional, well, it's not a traditional business, but I have a business which is hypnotherapy, past life regression therapy. I do starseed work. I do all sorts of different soul-based work. And then on the side, I'm just this fascination drawn to nature. And I kept doing and going to places in nature and videoing and photographing and doing all sorts of stuff. And there's one part of my brain that goes, that has got nothing to do with your business. Could you please stop it? You're
Oh, but
wasting
it
time.
does.
But it does, because we're just not brought up to think about these things, are we? When we're told what impacts your business, well, it's your marketing strategy. And I have a master's in marketing. Okay, but that's not working. Okay, it's all right. Have you got attachments? Have you got karma? Right. Okay. Have you cleared the ghost? Yes. Have you talked to your house spirit? Yes. Did you consider the rocks of the trees? No. Okay. Did you consider the history of this site? No, I just bought the bloody place. Like, it's a
Exactly.
continual education. And I think and I don't know how to phrase this, but I think also in this lifetime, I come from a Yugoslavian and German family on one side, and then a British, Scottish family on the other side. So I would consider myself European settler, Australian. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And watching other countries, I have become a bit scared about delving into certain areas that certain cultural groups have then called misappropriation. And there's
Mm.
part of me that goes, no, it's not misappropriation. I understand what you mean, and I do respect that. But this is also human knowledge. And I feel
Yeah.
like I would like
Agreed.
to learn some of that, but I'm afraid to be judged for that whole, how dare you? Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
I've gone through this too because I really would love to meet a First Nations people who can walk me through land and show me what I can eat and how I can respect the trees and what the trees are used for. And I kind of did that on this beautiful walk I went to where I was mentioning where the trees had been cut and it was like the tree graveyard. But at the same time, there's still this protective element because of everything that happened in the history. And I guess it comes down to what that nudges from spirit on who is privy to that knowledge and who's not, and that person that has that knowledge being willing and open to share it. So it's stepping through the fear as well, and that
Mm.
itself is its own initiation. Like, hey, I feel really pulled to share this with Katisha, or I feel really pulled to share this with Catherine. I don't know why yet, and my tribe or my area might be really cranky that I have, but I just have this pertinent need that I need to share it. So it's through that and taking that spiritual responsibility that will allow this knowledge to be passed on. And if you don't pass it on, someone else will get it. And that's what I've learned so much with a spiritual business. If you get, especially writing my books, if I didn't write, so I just finished a book, it's with an editor on spiritual ethics. If I didn't put that book into writing, someone else would have got it. Because that's, if the universe wants it out, they will give that information to somebody else that's going to act on it. So if you get that intuitive hit, you need to act on it like right here, right now, not put it in a drawer because it won't be there for
Yeah,
you in
yeah.
the next moment. And the same with this tree energy and even how this book has kind of evolved. And I was telling you before we started recording was that I just thought, oh, this will be a really quick book. I've got this, like, I've got, in saying that, I've got multiple journals. I didn't even realize it was just a journal fell at my feet the other day, right? And I opened up and I opened it up and I was like, oh, there's more tree stuff in here. So I've got multiple journals, which I'm trying to collate, which is making it difficult, plus things coming through from spirit. And then a friend shared on her Instagram story this forest of trees. And I wrote to her, those trees have a story to tell. And she wrote back and she said, tell me. And I went, oh, can I do that? And then all of a sudden I got this story about these trees. And then this whole idea, I guess it's like inspiration slash intuition evolved where it's like, no, you're going to get tree pictures from people and you're going to channel the story through. So if that person has permission or feels that they could have photographed as well, then these stories are going to come through. And the stories are so amazing and magical and nothing's the same and they're always for the person because usually the person I know something about them, usually the story that comes through is so appropriate for them. Or if I don't know them, I usually get back, how did you know I was going through that when I was with that tree? And I'm like, I didn't. It was
Yeah.
just that was the message that came through. There's so much tree wisdom that's there and this energy behind it. But again, it was following that intuitive hit of, oh, actually, no, there is more to that. And so all of a sudden, this project I thought would be done has now, I feel, turned into a year-long thing where I'm going to go even maybe
Yeah.
travel and connect with trees around the world. I don't know how it will look yet, but this is kind of how it evolved. A bit like I imagine you moving into your townhouse and then oh, I'm
Yeah.
suddenly medium
Because
business. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been writing a book about all the ghosts I've crossed over, and 90,000 words in, and I haven't even scratched the first round. Like, they're like, well, you could write this book for the rest of your life. And I'm like, yeah, I'm at overwhelm, because there's too many to talk about and too much
Maybe you need it like a
classification.
series, like part one,
Yeah.
part two, part three, because I feel that too, even with the spiritual ethics book. Like, I feel like it's done for the moment, but there's going to be a second edition and it's going to be a third edition because it's such a early field of things that are evolving with that. And no one talks about it. Again, no one talks about, I went to this tarot reader and they told me information which I thought would be true and it wasn't true, which actually changed the trajectory of my life, kind of thing. And I'm not picking on tarot readers because there are some brilliant tarot readers, but that's just the one that genuinely comes through. Or I had an experience where I went to a body worker who did crystal grid things and stuff like that. And I left feeling like my energy had been stolen. And I
Yeah,
was
sipping.
really not, yeah, and I really wasn't okay with that. And that caused me to dive further into and actually started the ball rolling with getting this information channeled through about, hey, actually, there needs to be a guideline and a set of, I call them pillars and foundations and things that we kind of need to hold to a standard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, I'm very conscious of the fact that it's on the hour, so that went very fast, and I think I could chat with you for like 7 books worth of discussions on trees.
Probably.
But keep us in the loop with how you're going with the tree project. And would you like people who are listening to the podcast to contact you about their tree stories, or how are you going? Because I don't
Oh,
want to overwhelm you
no,
with.
I would love that. As many, like, if it's meant to be, if I'm meant to hear the story, it'll come through. So I
Hmm.
haven't had one yet where it just said no. I have personally had trees say no to me, and that's fine too. But if
Hmm.
they wanted to check me out on Instagram, so Willow Healing SH, and then you can go into my link tree and all the links are there. So if you want to submit a tree photo in a story, you can. And then if your tree is chosen, then I will email you this tree story. And also you can choose if you want to be dedicated in the book too for contributing, which is really beautiful. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. That was really an enlightening discussion. I've got a lot of work to do. So I will say namaste and we'll talk again soon.
Namaste. Thank you, Katish. Thank you.
You're welcome.